All right. Any questions from last week? Or current events? All right. What we're going to do, I was looking over the syllabus and I'm adjusting. This topic was actually scheduled to happen like 2 weeks ago. And it's only because I actually packed more stuff into it that we didn't get to this yet. But we're getting to it now because there's reasons why I don't have you do a sex scan. Because the culture hasn't gotten around to doing that. But it's kind of important because in addictive behavior, we address it because for the reasons that I've talked about and we'll talk about now. So, hold on to your seats. So, psychoneuroimmunology. You've heard me talk about that? I may have mentioned it once. Yes? No? You remember?
Things related to it. I don't remember the term specifically.
Okay. So, here's what psychoneuroimmunology is. Remember where we're getting our science from. On the topic of today of sexuality. Our medical science is essentially 150 years old, which is nothing, right? So I'm watching, for example, the series on, I guess it's HBO or Showtime, The Masters of Sex, which is about Masters and Johnson basically doing their sex studies in the 50s, right? And so nobody really tackled that whole topic till then, really. It was basically a religious conversation, if that. And so one of the things that we're finding in terms of what I'm talking about with psychoneuroimmunology, what that means is your mind and emotions and the nervous system affect your response to disease organisms. However, with epigenetics, so this came up along with epigenetics. So epigenetics also means it isn't just the disease bugs, the organisms, it's also signals from the environment, which could be like electricity, cell phone signal, radioactivity, environmental pollution, all those things. But definitely what psychoneuroimmunology refers to specifically and how it affects our topic today. It's basically the relationship between mind, mood, and immune response. So if your mood is up, your immune system is up. If your mood is down, your immune system efficiency goes down. All right? And because everybody in the room is older than puberty, once you've passed puberty, basically, your sexual response, whether you're having sex or not, is always on. And what that means is your relationships with other people affect your health. You're having good good emotional responses, you're happy, you're fulfilled, your immune system is up, you're having drama, your immune system goes down, you get sick, you're more prone to diseases, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Immune system also is affected by drug intake, in particular certain mind or mood-altering chemicals. Obviously, many of the illegal drugs and pharmaceuticals as well affect the immune system response, as well as your mood and as well as whatever is going on in your relationship life, if you have a relationship life or whatever. I was going to actually give you a couple of links to an NPR piece I heard today, which talked about the addictiveness of video games and how video game authors are intentionally addicting you at an early age, like at 10, particularly with in-app, where you have to, suppose you're playing a game in which you have a Viking village. Well, they make you pay for weapons and building a fort and all that kind of stuff. And actually, Apple Corporation just settled a lawsuit because parents had complained that, wait, you're making our kids buy more stuff out within the game without asking us? No, we're not down with that. It's already bad enough that my kid wants to play for 12 hours, and even when I cut it down to 30 minutes, the kid gets mad, won't walk the dog, won't do the dishes because they're hung up on the 30 minutes that they're going to have, and they can't even do their homework. Well, that ain't good. So she had to cut it out altogether. But we're going to do internet addictions a little later, but close on this because essentially one of the things that previous classes have talked about in terms of, well, yeah, my partner cheated on me, cyber sex, is that cheating, da-da-da-da-da-da. So anyway, psychoneuroimmunology. The effect of the relationship between mind, mood, and immune response. So your immune system response is also assisted by fitness, exercise, and emotional, mental, and spiritual exercise, shall we say. Which creates an immune response. So physically, your immune response is like an interface through several different systems. The nervous system, the circulatory system, certain cells, and also bacteria. Friendly bacteria that keep the nasty bacteria at bay. And all these things are affected by your mood, drug intake, and also environmental factors. But particularly when if you're in a relationship and you have an argument and you catch a cold, boom, there's a reason why that is psychoneuroimmunology. Keeping your mood up keeps you healthy. So next from a food mood diary assignment. After tracking what I put in my mouth, I'm reminded of the importance of mindful ingestion. I seem to go through spurts of awareness. There are times when I'm fully cognizant of what I put in my mouth or take into my body, and others when I tune out and yield to lazy, inattentive consumption. The moments when I ingest unhealthy food or drink seem to be done in a hazy trance, much in the same way that most addictions take hold in an unaware state. True dat. So most addictions take hold in an unaware state. So prevention is practicing that which makes you strong, which requires a certain degree of awareness, self-awareness, environmental awareness. So not just physically what's around you, but also kind of like the attitudes of others around you. That environment. So empowerment, playing with language, literally means power within mind. That is, you have the power within your own mind. So M is within, power is the capacity to be effective, ment is mind. So mind, spirit of awareness within matter, self-mastery is basically an awareness state in which you define for yourself what is optimal and you act it out, despite what other people are doing around you. In children, we call this, the research literature calls it adaptive distancing. I'm not going to be like these people around me. I'm not going to grow up to be like the immediate adult role models, particularly people who are within families where stress is coming. All right, so in terms of teaching self-mastery, it's a condition that leads to freedom or liberation in any circumstance. So liberation from fear, where fear stems from ignorance of yourself. So, for example, this is a quote from a client. First, they break your wagon, then they sell you the tools to fix it. Talking about American society. So what if they taught you to create your own wagon or live as if you were indigenous, that is native to where you are, interdependent, that is contributing to and being supported by your environment, and so interdependent with your environment. And this principle is found within community-defined evidence, that is bodies of knowledge found within specific communities, like that are older than Western civilization, which don't necessarily get studied by Western civilization, but basically says, okay, this is what we have to learn to deal with. Be alive within your own skin. Be aware of your, not only your personal history, your people's history, and where you're going. And then what if you're adopted? Like, okay, well, if you're adopted, then you might have to take on stuff that's healthier than the people that have been around you. And you might have to do that anyway.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Can you please come back over this way?
Yes. Right. Sorry. What part of that did you miss?
A lot of it?
Ask a question if you need further amplification.
Okay.
Keep forgetting about that. All right. So we're going to talk about sex. So who talks about sex in a healthy way? And of course, what do I mean by healthy? So safer sex is one meme. Are you familiar with what I mean by a meme? I will go into memes way later. But a meme is like a virus of the mind. Okay? It's the smallest unit of self-replicating thought. It's the technical definition. And it spreads. So it's like a virus of the mind. So when the concept was first coined by Richard Dawkins in the mid to late 80s. And so Dawkins basically said, all right, meme, M-E-M-E, is to gene, meme is to thought what gene is to DNA. So a gene is the smallest unit of replicating DNA. And a meme is the same thing. So when we talk about a viral idea, or a video is going viral, that's where it came from. The concept of viral is from a meme, even though they might not see it. But now you're starting to see memes being talked about on the news as part of common culture. And I'm just saying it's been around since the mid-'80s. So the idea of a meme. Safer sex is a particular meme introducing you to addictive behavior. So for example, most addictive behaviors start out or engage the brain reward system. They're pleasurable, so they're repeated. Right? Just like it's just a function of lizard brain. Can I eat it? Will it eat me? Repeat pleasure. Approach pleasure, flee from pain, repeat pleasure. Real basic, right? So sex is basically equated with brain reward. So the purpose of zygotes is to make more zygotes. That is us. We're zygotes. So, therefore, after personal survival, species survival, in other words, reproduction, is hardwired into our system. Okay, so humans are hardwired so that they don't have a sexual season, a rut or an estrus, or they're in heat. We're not dogs or cats or horses. We're like dolphins. Always on. It's always on, potentially. So, which means the brain reward pathways which reinforce survival behavior associated with sex are always on after puberty, which makes sex potentially an addictive behavior to understand. Often intimately connected with food, drugs, etc. So when I said like a week or so ago, basically think about portrayals of sex in the media. Do you ever see them sober? There's always something associated with, a drink, a joint, whatever. Pickups in a bar, all that. Okay? So humans shape culture and are shaped by culture. So in cultures of tradition, what I mean by older than Western civilization, they actually expect you at puberty to go through some form of rites of passage in which they tell you your responsibility for whatever gender expression you have. And so in cultures of tradition, where you have, for example, among the Osage Nation, Native Americans, 7 genders, only 2 of which we'd recognize as heterosexual. 7. And you're trained to them from birth. And each of them has an integrated role within their society. In Africa today, 12 kinds of marriage practiced among the people who actually fielded all-women armies to fight against Europeans. So if an African woman can lead combat troops into battle against Europeans and win, are you going to tell her who she can bring to her tent? Or how many? I don't think so. Would you evolve a social form that accepts that? Would a white anthropologist going to Benin in 1978 document that? So it was happening in 1978. It's also happening before Christianity was invented, before colonization, and is happening now. So I'm just saying. Sexual diversity exists. It's a reality. Programmed within the genome. Period. That's the science. So you don't have to believe in that. That's okay, but I'm a scientist. Truth is, whatever happens repeatedly and predictably. Right? So humans shape culture and are shaped by culture. So in this culture, we do not teach our young to know their bodies as well as their cell phones. In cultures of tradition, around puberty, they have rites of passage, which, whatever role the child is recognized or accepts, they are trained to do that responsibly. So women of the tribe are often the ones to teach the younger girls, the older women, okay, this is what your role is going to be, and whatever role you're going to be. There's a similar role that happens with men. In America, we don't have that. We don't. And we suffer for it. Okay, so the basic scientific health-driven ethic is safer sex. And that particular meme as a model is only basically since HIV infection in the early 80s. And if you've never heard it before, well, right. That's a problem. So I do have an agenda. It's so that you are healthy, and I'm trying to give you also what the science talks about it, because it's a uncomfortable subject. Oh well, we're adults. So here's what safer sex is. So let's say sex is an adult. Adult is in quotes, because who's an adult? And what is adult defined as? Are you an adult at 18? Are you an adult at 16? Are you an adult at 21? So the basic American rites of passage are like what? You can get a driver's license at 16. You can vote at 18. You can legally drink at 21. But are you taught to use those powers and capacities before you achieve them? Okay, if you are part of a religious community that basically says no sex before marriage, right, how many people do that? That's just like people waiting till they're 21 to drink in this culture. We're using sex to sell cars and toothpaste and computers and all kinds of stuff, but what else? You know, prohibition, we found as a strategy, doesn't work. People rebel. Their raging hormones happen, right? So, sex is an adult activity. Best engage with people capable of making sober, mature, that is, angel brain, 20 years in the future, decisions regarding all the possible consequences, the emotional consequences, the power relationships, sexually transmitted diseases or STIs and sexually transmitted infections, pregnancy, abortion, childbirth, child rearing, child support, child nurturing, child education, all both yours and the child, the economics, etc. That's what those reasonable definitions of adult, because adults think about that stuff 20 years in the future. Okay, so, and safer sex means not only that, but not just barrier methods in terms of contraceptions if you're heterosexual, even if you're not heterosexual, right? Not just barrier methods, but the infection status of your partner or partners. Safer sex means knowing that in advance. All of that. Having worked that out independently before you meet somebody. Oops, I got 3 kids. How do I do it? Do it where you start where you are. Okay? If you don't or can't do that, best not to be knocking boots, so to speak, from a scientific point of view. But a lot of people don't do that. And that's not the ethic that's in our society. That's the ethic arrived from drug counselors saying, okay, what would be healthy? Because should you be learning this from a theoretically celibate Catholic priest who's basically working on a 2,000-year-old meme? Or your imam, or your rabbi, or whatever your church denomination is. No sex before marriage. So then, what happens with teenagers is they find ways to work around that. Oh, is oral sex sex? Oh, oral sex isn't sex. So we'll do anal sex. So as long as I'm a virgin in my vagina, I'm still a virgin. No. But people get those memes. They're saying that stuff. And so if they're part of, for example, fundamentalist Christians where they sign the pledge that they're going to be celibate, no sex before marriage, and so, oh yeah, well, I'm still having anal and oral sex, so I'm still a virgin. No, you aren't. But the church isn't doing that inquiry. So this is basically, I'm not being raunchy here, I'm just saying, I'm a health professional. This is the stuff that happens in our community now. We need to have a more rational conversation about that in terms of preventing problems. So this is the 21st century. You can use Scripture to guide your life. But remember when Scripture was written. Say before the 7th, 17th, 19th century, 1800s. Right? Before there was bacteriology, widespread electricity, or widespread scientific literacy. And you're in college. So there's an expectation that you're supposed to be operating at a different level than those. Right? Okay, so while there's some things that are timeless, there are other things which have greater effect on your life than admonitions, that is, prohibitions on how to act and prohibitions from acting. Oh, no sex until marriage. And then only the missionary position. Whatever. So, for example, I've mentioned this before, but just so you have a slide about it. So, in science, in particular, the science called public health. So, worldwide, especially in Africa, but also in the United States, HIV is transmitted primarily through heterosexual sex, where a woman often has sex with a man who has had sex outside of their relationship. She contracts the disease because of a lack of access to contraception or barrier methods of conception. She passes it on to her unborn child, and then lack of affordable treatment makes AIDS essentially a death sentence in those countries. All right, and again, as I said a couple of weeks ago, you can't do prevention unless you can talk about the subject, and a woman in those particular countries has to have access to barrier methods and the ability to use them, as well as the ability to say no love, no glove. And if she can't say that in her culture, then HIV gets spread. In America, this same pattern is still largely true. HIV is basically vectored, that is transmitted by heterosexual transmission, with the addition of injectable drug use and multiple unprotected sex with either males or females. So when you have sex with someone, you're having sex with everyone they've had sex with in terms of biology, as in disease organisms. Just like, we have a cloud of bacteria all around us because we're breathing the same air. We're also coming through our skin, etc., etc. Cold season, flu season, there's a cloud of bacteria around us, right? So you interact with that, with a person with intimate contact, you are interacting with their ecology, if you will. So everyone has the same general types of bacteria that are normal, but your bacteria are specific to you. So even if you're just transmitting not disease organisms, but the normal complement of bacteria with multiple partners, even if you're not infected with an STI, those bacteria get transmitted and your body treats them as if they're a disease organism. Okay? So except for when you're in close proximity, like family colds, lovers catching colds, having someone else's viruses and bacteria introduced to you can make you sick or cause an immune system reaction, even though no infection will show up, because it's the normal bacteria. Just someone else's bacteria. All right. So, sex is an adult activity with spiritual, emotional, financial, political, psychological, and health consequences. So you engage in it knowing that and planning for it. So this is, I apologize for this coming from a heterosexual getting pregnant framework, but you can basically do the translation if that is not your gender expression or orientation. If I became pregnant with this person or in a long-term relationship with this person, would I want to have kids with them? So not just biological or adoptive children, but relatives, elders, pets, other people in my life. They're not just having sex with you and your genome, but if this goes long term, how do they fit in your life? A lot of people don't necessarily think about that. And especially with the whole phenomenon that's erupted in the last 20 years of relationships being online, because again, we'll talk about this when we get to the internet. Okay, the internet was designed for weapons research. That's its original intention. And so what it does is give the power of television into the hands of civilians, except that you can interact with it, television. That's what the net is. So people can conceal the truth. People lie on the internet about who they are. They can sculpt their profiles. And I'm not just talking about sock puppets. You heard that term? Sock puppets? One person, multiple internet identities, multiple Facebook pages, pretending to be somebody else, and it's the same person. The internet facilitates that, sock puppets. Same person, multiple internet identities. Separate. common enough phenomenon, so that it has a term. I just learned it last week. Sock puppets, really? Wow. All right, so with another person, what do we agree on in terms of the relationship sexuality? When we disagree, can we work it out? Do we have similar life, educational, financial, and career goals? Do we have similar or compatible religious, spiritual, or cultural beliefs? Sexual partners need to be able to talk about sexuality in a variety of settings and contexts. Before. So if I were going to, I often joke about people having picker software, like your picker app needs an upgrade, right? So if I were to say, this is the code for your picker software, like it would be being able to talk about this stuff so that you don't necessarily keep repeating the same bad relationship. Why do I keep getting the knights in shining armor that are actually toads? They look like princes, or princesses, or my queen, or whatever it is, whatever your particular thing is, your prince or princess charming, your soulmate, your whatever. And it isn't optimal. And you keep having a serial that is more than one of the same person in different bodies. Did you ask certain basic questions? So, basic knowledge coming from society usually starts in middle school. That is the plumbing lecture, which, if it's a video or a film strip, it was a film strip in my day. Video, it might be an internet app now, who knows? The plumbing lecture. And then STD prevention, and then safe touch in elementary school. Not much of a conversation, and if this was the first time, or having the talk with your parents. If your parents did the talk. Or, where did you learn about sex? Oh, from my friends? So where was the conversation held? So part of the skill, so none of those necessarily involve having skills, dealing with self-knowledge, having emotions and impulses as opposed to being your emotions and impulses. So having versus being able to separate. Yes, I have emotions, but I'm not necessarily my emotions. I don't have to follow them. I can note that they're there. Okay, so forming a core identity which operates beyond your emotions of the moment and which may be independent of the role modeling or lack of role modeling in your culture. It's kind of a function of the angel brain, being able to think about future consequences in the midst of powerful emotions. So many people, for example, learn how to have sex from the sex industry itself. That is porn, literature, and so the question there is, okay, sex is a commodity. It is a consumable product. And so from that point of view, the only reason is yes or no. The only question is yes or no, not the other questions. Will we or won't we? Not should we or must we? Or how do we? With me so far? Because I'm throwing out a lot. Sorry to get heavy, but here it is. This is an addictive behavior. So in order for it not to be an addictive behavior, you have to have some forethought and make some choices and be willing to not only make mistakes, but live with your mistakes. And not that children are a mistake, but there it is. Questions or comments so far? You guys are always so quiet. So, a side assignment. 3 questions. You can answer for yourself. What do you use sex for in your life? How can you avoid being used for sex in your life? What is the appropriate age for a sexual partner and why? Let's start with the last question. Answer that. What's the appropriate age for a sexual partner?
17.
17? Why?
I think that's just a good standard age of
Okay.
discovery.
I mean, I lost my virginity at 17, but,
I'm just throwing that out there. It's
Yeah.
not an orthodoxy.
I have a relative who took herself to Planned Parenthood and her boyfriend to Planned Parenthood at 15. Now, the law, because of sexual abuse, the law in Oregon is that any 14-year-old woman can actually go and seek contraception and go to Planned Parenthood on her own, or to report sexual abuse at 14, but also can seek access on her own. Now, if this person had been my daughter, for example, do I want my 15-year-old daughter, do I even want to think about that? That means I didn't get the opportunity to meet the kid at the door with a shotgun. Boy! Okay, if my daughter had taken herself and her boyfriend, got an AIDS test, got an HIV test, essentially got the range of options for birth control, etc. Okay, that's showing adult responsibility. Can't argue with that. However I might feel about that as a father of daughters, right? Same thing, with anybody, right? But at least she's able to do that. So, 17. Okay, what about age spread? Well, there is what the law says. The definition of statutory rape. Right? But there are some cultures where, certainly a century ago in Oregon, people were getting married at 12. Well, since the lifespan was 35, I guess 12 makes sense. Now we know better, it's probably better in terms of your baby making equipment, to have a kid in your 20s than your teens, but that's relatively recent. So, what about age spread? Think out loud.
Age spread.
Yeah. If someone, so statutory rape, say for example, if a 17-year-old has sex with a 16-year-old, that's okay, or an 18-year-old, well, the 18-year-old better watch out, they're legally an adult, right? But what about 27 and 17? 24 and 17? Now, the reason I ask this question, right? There's usually a reason for me asking a rhetorical question out loud, okay? So, as an example, 1/3 When I was working at Churchill High School in the 80s, at that point, 1/3 of the HIV positive population in Oregon got infected in middle school by adults. So that's why this became a drug prevention issue. Why? Because a girl in middle school, 14, 15, 13, 14, 15, thinks that the fact that a 27-year-old guy being attracted to her, oh, well, he must think I'm real mature. No, he's a meth head junkie who has been infected with HIV and is basically taking advantage of your youth and inexperience and getting you infected. Because no woman his age, first of all, there's the no glove, no love thing, and then there's the HIV testing, because I know that you are, using needles and not taking care of yourself. So that's why the age range thing, right? There's a power imbalance. Part of it is age and experience. There is somebody saying he loves you or they love you, but they're manipulating you for sex. This is where it becomes life and death. And so when you meet a few of those kids who were infected and who are still alive now, but HIV positive and got HIV positive by adults in middle and high school, where were the parents? Because the plumbing lecture, the talk, didn't include those facts. Certainly wasn't coming from the church. So I'm just saying, I'm not putting you down for being part of a church or mosque or synagogue or whatever. Just saying, to rely on those things in the 21st century is not protecting you. So the classic boundaries: no sex with family. Families in quotes, because family is often construed to mean biological family, but it's also relational family or blended family. People having sex with their foster siblings. Oh, well, they're not our same genome, so she's not really my sister. Seen that happen. My uncle, my kissing cousin, my, whatever, family. So that's a boundary. Under 21, the 3-year age difference thing within statutory rape definition. So over 21, a 10-year age spread. I mean, the reason there's a question mark there is people feel away if there's more than a 10-year spread. Or maybe 10 years is okay. Depends. I'm just saying there's a question mark because people raise questions about that. 20 years starts looking strange, but then there's gender differences about that. Okay, we don't have a male equivalent of cougars. Or DILFs. We got MILFs but no DILFs. What's up with that, right? So, fidelity, that is, do people cheat? What's cheating? Do they have open relationships? Do they not? What are the forms? So when I'm saying, for example, 12 kinds of marriage, right. So is that a group marriage? Is that, where is that allowed? What are the social forms? So for example, in not only, this is where it's codified, for example, in Islam, but the whole thing about multiple wives came from if your brother is killed in battle, then it's your responsibility to take on his wife and family. And you can have up to 4 wives. That's where that came from, war. You had the responsibility to take care of your brother's family, which might mean you had multiple wives and therefore children. And you still have to deal with each one of them equally. So boundaries, rebound relationships. So that's defined as inside of 6 months to a year. It's not so much the calendar time, but people often will break up with somebody, then hook up with somebody within what we call the rebound period, which means you haven't entirely emotionally healed, and sometimes you're getting, especially if somebody's cheating on you, you might, cheat with somebody else or get in a relationship with somebody else for revenge sex. There's all kinds of interesting little complications. So part of the whole rebound relationship piece is basically, okay, when you go through a breakup, be alone for 6 to 8 months, 6 to 12 months, whenever, just try that. Go on a relationship fast. So, professional relationships. This is where, for example, power dynamics come in. Now, I'm a drug counselor operating in a higher education environment. So, because I'm a treatment person and every student, as well as potentially every staff person, is a potential client, I don't have personal relationships with anybody outside of the classroom or outside of the professional relationship as defined by the campus. I maintain actually a separate Facebook for people I know through the college and my friends. 2 separate Facebook pages, and I don't friend people that I know from college, except on the professional Facebook page. Not that I make that difference, but again, if I don't friend you, don't take it personally. Okay, so client practitioner. So you can have sex with a client the same time you can have sex with your kid. Like never. Okay, so don't date students, don't date coworkers. Simple. Don't have to. Got a relationship, got kids, got grandkids. That's enough. All right? So, professional boundaries, client practitioner. So that's me personally. You may have heard of other people, students hooking up with other instructors, etc., etc. Yeah, I don't play that. But it has happened, and it's gone back to like Socrates, who had sex with his students. So it's been kind of one of those things that is, I'm just not airing dirty laundry. I'm just saying, look, if 800 years went by before college looked at substance abuse as part of the culture, they haven't really looked at sex as part of the culture either. They made rules against it. So we just have these funny little boundary things, which I, don't particularly like, but there we are. All right? So, professional relationships, client practitioner, doctor patient, teacher student, priest parishioner, parish member, caseworker client, supervisor employee, right? There's power differentials that are set up that are classic boundaries for intimate relationships. That there's consequences for violating, if no legal consequences, that if you are at the lesser end of the power relationship, that would not necessarily be good for you. So just a word to the wise up front. Clear enough? So, a friend of mine, actually, we talked about, okay, what should people teach in school? Because they're not actually teaching this. And since I have a platform of a classroom, she and I kind of brainstormed, okay, What if we were doing this right? If there was a relationship school, okay, like how do you begin, sustain, and end relationships in a healthy way? Like consciously. How do you do that? Everybody should go to relationship school. Like once you graduate from relationship school, you can have a parenting license, because you don't have to be heterosexual to be parents. Yeah, we got a driver's license, why not a parenting license? And I'm not talking about like in a 1984 kind of like a China one kid per couple thing. I'm talking about, okay, I know how to parent. Through the terrible twos and, the threes, and 3 is 2 plus 1, and 4 is 2 squared, and, and 40 is 2 times 10. 2 squared times 10, yeah. You have people that haven't really matured even though they're chronologically adults. How do you be in a relationship with them? So, what they should teach in school. Self-gnosis. Self-gnosis literally means self-knowledge. Like, who am I? Who are you? What we called a spiritual cartography. So that would look like this. Let's see. This is Maui. Sorry, I'm a psych major, not an art major. Right? So, let's see. This is Hana. This is Kipahulu. Here's the airport, Kahalui. Here's Lahaina. All right, so a spiritual cartography goes like this. Say this is my favorite place on the planet. This is like where I feel spiritually most alive. So where is my inner Kipahulu? That is the jungle waterfall that pours into the ocean, that is bracing, that's quiet, there's birds, there's flowers. My quiet and happy place. Where is that? Where is my heart? Where is my third eye, my vision? Where can I travel? That's why the airport. Where is my jaws? So, jaws is like a humongous 70 to 80 foot wave. Big wave surfers go to. Where do I go for my thrills? Because everybody likes a little danger sometimes, a thrill, right? So spiritual cartography is like this. Where are those places in me? Where do I need to go to cool out, to get rejuvenated? So not just where are those places? What do I need to do to be in those places? That's a spiritual cartography. What am I so part of what they should teach in school, nonviolent communication. I need to be able to communicate what my real state is in a way that doesn't necessarily, whether you feel guilty about it or not. Sorry, I forgot about this. So, the skill of nonviolent communication. How can I communicate my needs? How can I listen to other people? personal erogenous zone mapping. Okay, what turns you on where? In what order? What is that? How do you talk to your partner about that? What feels good where and when? With who and why? Contraception and conception. So before barrier methods, there was actually ways and technologies of doing that. So there was a project in Indian country where they had a fetal alcohol syndrome problem, and the fetal alcohol syndrome, basically 80% of the fetal alcohol affected births were happening with teen moms. And the problem with the moms is that they were having sex while loaded and drunk, and were like 3-4 months pregnant before they started showing, and were still partying during the critical formation of the kid. So the kid was being born with fetal alcohol syndrome if they weren't spontaneously aborted with, cocaine or meth use or whatever. Right? So, simple technology. One of the girls came up with this herself. A pencil and a calendar. Chart your moon cycle. Okay, don't have your moon for a month to 3 months. You're pregnant. Stop using. Cut the fetal alcohol syndrome rates in half in the first year. Then they started talking to some of the elders, the women in particular, who said, yes, our tribe used to basically teach conscious conception, where you could have sex while fertile and still not conceive, without barrier methods, because it was in your mind and your heart and your spirit to not have the kid come, to not get pregnant. And we used to teach that. And we stopped teaching it because, well, first of all, the boarding school experience, the U.S. Cavalry, and those cultural patterns got disrupted. But that wasn't just with Native Americans. If you go back far enough with Europeans, that was also the case too, past 2,000 years ago. Right? So those techniques still exist in some places. Well, we don't talk about them here in America. So, Tantra, that is sexuality and sexually focused meditation, also / sacred sex, where there is a, I don't know, I actually could move the slides around, but well, I think we'll just get to this in time. Joanne Lulin, who is a lesbian sex therapist, counsels couples as well as gay and lesbian folks, who's also in recovery, said, and pointed, the reason I started the lecture talking about sex and brain reward, she says, sex done right gets you high. But if you have issues with getting high because of your recovery, because of the things you did while getting loaded, if you got loaded to have sex and you feel guilty about that, you've got a whole lot of baggage loaded onto sexuality. Sex done right gets you high. Oh, you feel guilty about feeling good? Maybe you shouldn't. Or maybe you should do a reframe on that. All right? So sacred sex is basically using sex as a vehicle for meditation, or meditating during sexuality. One word for that in Sanskrit is Tantra. So, psychoecology, that is another thing they should teach in school, your relationship to the natural world and how it affects your mind. So, basically, in addition to exercise, you also need a relationship with nature. Emotional hygiene. Is that clear enough? Emotional hygiene, what that is? And also then, after all that, balancing your life, balancing your checkbook, investing and saving, money sadhana, which is sadhana is a Sanskrit word which basically means a daily spiritual practice or discipline, except when we're talking about with money, how are you doing your spending habits, your investing habits, consistent with your life purpose, which actually means you've had to have had developed a life purpose in this process. And then finally, financial planning, depending on how you define family. But again, financial planning. Again, this is all using angel brain in ways that so far we haven't done. So this would be relationship school. All of this. Whatever kind of relationship you have. And because of academic freedom, I can talk about it as part of this class and the pro class, but we don't have a set of classes because we can't necessarily get the feds to pay for that kind of thing. It has to be career-oriented. Why isn't this career-oriented? Seems like it is career-oriented to me, but okay. Well, that's up to the family. That's up to the church. Well, they ain't talking about this stuff. So, even though I did reference scripture and spirituality, I usually start from a scriptural point of view. I decided to mix it up and reverse that. Let's start with the science first. Right? Because a lot of times if people have any reference, if I use that word yet, referent, R-E-F-E-R-N-T, referent. A referent in psychology is a psychological object. Okay, like a cup. You know what a cup is? Cups take different forms. A bottle. You know what a bottle is? Bottles take different forms. There's a referent. When your feelings are bottled up. Okay, that's a referent. Also a metaphor. But the referent is a psychological object. Right? Referring to my spiritual cartography as the island of Maui. My happy place. Different parts of it. Where's my heart? That's a referent, right? So, references to sexual love in scripture, science, public health, and politics. I started with the science and public health first, because it's intro to addictive behavior. But a lot of people's attitudes about sex are shaped by scripture, to the degree that there's any conversation at all. So using the Bible, Quran, Kama Sutra, anthropology, HIV/AIDS, and liberation schools, which you might not have heard of, but part of my culture. Basically, creating a school to teach what schools should teach, but don't. So we create our own schools to do that. So sexuality in scripture. So from a 21st century point of view, ancient scriptures, like for example, the 42 declarations of innocence, the principles of Maat from Egypt, you don't know them, you might not have known them unless you had taken an African American history class, so the 10 Commandments all came from them, because the 42 principles of Maat, right? 10 Commandments came from Moses. But who raised Moses? The Egyptians. He was steeped in the Egyptian state religion. So if the 10 Commandments are already contained in the 42 principles of Maat, did just God repeat himself, or be easier just to file off the serial numbers and say, thou shalt not do this, do that, no adultery, etc., etc. which came first. I'm just saying chronologically, which came first, really. Okay, the Upanishads, which are in India, which are quoted in the Kama Sutra and partially in the Bible. The Bible is actually a whole separate piece. The Quran. So, for example, from a 21st century point of view, scriptures tell us more what not to do than what to do. And that's where they get problematic. Okay? That is the texts that have been allowed to exist. That survive conquest or destruction. Okay? Meaning, for example, some have been hidden or destroyed, suppressed. So, for example, Adam's first wife, Lilith. Anybody heard of Lilith before? Yes or no? Okay. Adam had a wife before Eve, Lilith. They were created together. And in the Jewish scriptures that preceded the Bible, that make up Genesis, within Genesis there are 3 different versions of creation that got edited into one that you see surviving in today's contemporary Bibles. So in the original, Adam had a wife before Eve, Lilith. They were created together out of clay. And they were equal. And Lilith considered herself equal to Adam. No, you're not the boss of me. And by the way, we were created together. And so she left him. And then he got bummed and went looking for her. And then she was, in the scriptures, she was seen consorting with demons, that is having sex with, there are no other humans theoretically, so it must have been a demon because Lilith was on top, like cowboy style. Right? And so in no part of the Bible do you hear any reference to missionary position. Right? It's not in there. Well, where did that idea come from? Missionary, a man superior to a woman? Well, that's biblical. But it's hidden in the text because woman is supposed to submit to man. Right? Heard that phrase? Heard that concept? By her being on the bottom. You're supposed to submit to your husband in the missionary position. Nothing else. Everything else is sinful. Any sexual contact that doesn't lead to pregnancy is sinful. In fact, that is some of the legal definitions of sodomy. Now, I'm just bringing this up because in terms of where Scripture becomes law, becomes policy, becomes a conversation not talked about or talked about shamefully, it still drives people's behavior. Okay, so Lilith. Adam had a wife, Lilith. So Lilith leaves her. Adam's bummed and he's not coming back. And she's, having, 100 demon children a day. That's why there's so many demons, because of Lilith and her disobedience. So Adam's bummed. God said it is not right for man to be alone. Creates Eve from the rib. 5 kids. Oh, Cain and Abel and Seth. You didn't hear about the twin daughters. So Cain killed Abel because he was jealous of Abel actually being in love with one of the twin sisters. That got edited out. I have book references for this, right? So, in any case, did Jesus have at least one kid with Mary Magdalene? What about Jesus' brothers and sisters? Right? We don't hear about Jesus having sex. But in that culture, his particular culture did not believe in celibacy. You can't be a rabbi, and that is advise married couples unless you married yourself. Because we don't believe in celibacy. So how did that get edited out? Okay, so for example, if you've seen the Matrix movies, the Merovingian, the actual Merovingians believe they are genetically descended from Jesus and Mary Magdalene's kids. It's one of the sects of Christianity, SECTS, sects, branches of Christianity. The Merovingians believe they're descendants of Jesus through Mary Magdalene's kids, which are not referred to in the Bible, or the versions of the Bible you're familiar with. So the reason I'm bringing all this stuff up is, okay, there's a lot of hidden history, even within, say, if you're familiar with the Christian framework, around sex. So you have all this hidden stuff, and this shaming stuff, and incest, and adultery, and all this kind of stuff. But so all these examples of what not to do, but nothing about what to do, except a narrowly defined correct behavior. And no ability to ask questions to this level. Okay? So, the texts that still exist point to a reverence for spiritual forces which can be expressed sexually, whether to create new life, create a stronger relationship, create art, create music, create stronger bonds between families and groups. Okay, so Scripture is what you've been allowed to see and allowed to know about. So, in early Western Christianity, it was a death sentence to attempt to read, and particularly attempt to read the Bible if you were a poor person. This is basically at the time of the creation of the King James Version of the Bible. The only people allowed to read were rich people. Poor person attempted to read, they killed you. So, King James Version of the Bible, right? You weren't actually allowed to know about anything else, even in America, in early America, too, other than the King James Version of the Bible. So, the text that still exists outside of, well, even within Christianity, but outside of Christianity, point to a reverence for spiritual forces which can be expressed sexually, but not just sexually. Okay? They are creative forces, whether to create new life, create a stronger relationship, create art, create music, create stronger bonds between families and groups. So, for example, Scripture is words written by human beings, but attributed to non-human beings like angels, God, or gods, depending on your religion. Right? Scripture can and has been translated, edited, misinterpreted, misused towards the ends of, well, mostly men, but humans. So expect problems when translating from one language to another and another and another. So expect problems when your enemies translate your scripture for their own ends. So, for example, historical fact, the Romans killed Yeshua, who you know by the name Jesus, and essentially hijacked his religion to justify world conquest. That's what they were about. So Aramaic-speaking Christians, so Aramaic is the language that he spoke, as I made reference to it a couple of weeks ago. Aramaic-speaking Christians never led armies, never enslaved people, never burned witches, never colonized by conquest, or devised schemes of racial supremacy or gender supremacy by obscuring the African roots of Christianity. They basically believed in equality between the sexes. Not believed past, believe today, using Scripture, but you've never been allowed to know about them. Okay, so Christianity in that sense is an African religion in terms of where it came from the East, but the form you're familiar from is from the West. and essentially used for conquest. So then what it's going to do is then shape your ideas about sexuality to its own ends. Sex only for procreation. Period. For the state or the church. So, for example, the oldest book in the world, an Egyptian Bible, the Peshitta, which is in Aramaic, which dates back to 450 AD. So, the Egyptian state religion, Netarianism. Neter means creator, is within creation. Thank you. The many are one. So Netarianism versus Roman version of Christianity, the pursuit of self-knowledge, self-mastery and unity, justice rather than conquest, liberation rather than salvation, equality between men and women. Therefore, there's always a sacred feminine, and there was a sacred feminine in Aramaic, or is a sacred feminine in Aramaic versions of Christianity. So the Holy Trinity is the Mother, Father, and the child of true humanity. Okay, so Judaism itself doesn't have a tradition of celibacy. Rabbis and others are allowed and even required to marry and have families. So Yeshua, technically as a non-Jew, could not marry a Jewish woman, so that's why he and Mary Magdalene could get together, because she wasn't Jewish either. Okay, so in any case, it's not likely he was celibate because of the injunction to be fruitful and multiply within that particular cultural framework. So I'll continue this Thursday. So roll music, because I know we're somewhere under a minute.
Lane Online. Learn, unlearn, relearn.